I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. And with all due respect to Edward Snowden, who joined Twitter today, welcome to the party. How about you let us know, though, when you're on Snapchat? On the show tonight, people not named Donald Trump. Imagine that. Although I'm pretty sure we're going to find a way to squeeze him in at some point. But first, both legacy candidates in the presidential race have arguably had more bad days than good over the course of their campaigns. Today, one of them, Jeb Bush, tried to seize the initiative with a big speech on energy policy. Bush wants to make it easier to export crude oil and natural gas. He wants the Keystone Pipeline approved, and he wants to reduce regulations that allow states to have more say in how they tap their own energy resources. This is Bush's third policy address this month. John, is winning the policy primary part of what's going to give Jeb Bush the boost he needs?
Mark, we've heard a lot from the Bush campaign about how well financed they are. I think that I think doesn't matter at all unless the dogs start to eat the dog food. And so to get the dogs to eat the dog food, policy is one possible way to do that. I don't think any of Bush's speeches on policy have been so magnificent or so different or so distinctive that they're going to give him the edge that he needs. But they're a place to start.
They're thoughtful. There's lots of great policy people working on them, but they're not that different
from other things
than the other Republican positions. And I think eventually, if he's laid this foundation on policy, there's some voters who will come his way. But there's no doubt that the money's not going to do it. The policy speeches are going to do it. There still needs to be another ingredient, including working hard.
Right.
You know, I don't want to second guess how they did this, but announcing it in Pennsylvania late in the day is just not going to get you a lot of coverage.
But look, you think back to the campaign that we started with in our lives professionally, that Bill Clinton campaign in 1992. His policies, which were the undergirding of his candidacy, were different. They were distinctive. They were thematically, ideologically coherent, and they helped him stand out. Bush, a little bit too orthodox. Not enough there that makes you say, wow, he's a different kind of Republican.
I did on tax policy a bit. With
a little bit.
Middle class and working class things. I do believe that in the end, this is a building block, but it is not going to change the momentum, which is what he needs right now.
Absolutely right. All right. The other legacy candidate, Hillary Clinton, is trying to turn attention away from the waterfall of negative email stories. A big part of that plan is the big dog himself, Bill Clinton, who used a classic defense from the 90s in a CNN interview this weekend.
I received a call in 91, before I started running for president, from the Bush White House, from a man I did. He said, "We've looked at the field. You're the only one that can win. The press has to have someone every election. We're going to give them you. You better not run." So all of a sudden, something nobody thought was an issue, Whitewater, that turned out never to be an issue, winds up being a $70 million investigation. And all the hammering happened, and you ask voters, do you really believe this? This amounts to anything? No. But do you trust him as much? No. There must be something. So this is just something that has been a regular feature of all of our presidential campaigns.
The other arrow in Hillary's quiver is an interview that she's just given with Lena Dunham of Girls.
I was terrified about losing my identity and getting lost in, the kind of wake of Bill's force of nature personality. That was a large part of, the ambivalence and the worry that, I wouldn't necessarily know who I was or what I could do if I got married to someone who was going to chart a path that he was incredibly clear about. My ideas were much more inchoate.
Mark, there is so much going on here in each piece of this strategy. But my question to you is whether this is, in fact, together or separately, is this the way back for Hillary Clinton?
We talked about building blocks with Jeb and how policy is for him. I think both these elements are potential building blocks for her. One is Bill Clinton going out and making the case. I think eventually, if they go after Bernie Sanders, he may be the one who has to do it. Her in that appearance, there are people mocking it. I thought she was relaxed and casual and showed herself more than she has in almost any other interview. I think both those were relatively strong building blocks for her, not cure-alls.
Well, I totally agree with that. I mean, we have been wondering when we would get to see Bill Clinton start to take a bigger role in this campaign. On some levels, seeing him out there gives you a sign of just how concerned they are. Because the truth is, if she was very strong, he would still.
Interviews for CGI always does.
But he would not be necessarily giving that interview if she was so strong. The other thing is for her to play that card as a woman, which is very powerful for her, historic, important in terms of just the demographics of what will get her nominated. she got to find a fresh way to do it. Doing it with Lena Dunham is a fresh way to do it. And I don't care whether people mock it or not. That's going to get seen by a lot of people and give her a fresh context to make that argument.
The big dog is rusty by his own admission. He said the same thing in 2008, and then he'd make some mistakes. He keeps saying it now. He doesn't know what Snapchat is, I don't think, President Clinton. He's gonna.
Let's hope not for his sake.
They better figure out a way to get that guy audition. Even Bill Clinton needs to audition off Broadway because he's going to make mistakes, and that could kill him. Yeah. All right. Kevin McCarthy is the smart money now to replace John Boehner as the Republican Speaker of the House. Still, there are some concerns in the party that McCarthy's too inexperienced in some ways, too political, and not necessarily policy-oriented enough for the job. There are also pending competitive races brewing for the majority leader and the majority whip spots under Boehner, under the new Speaker. Boehner said today there's no date yet for those leadership elections. So, John, with a lot of uncertainty now about timing and about who will run and who will win, are the Republicans headed towards a new leadership team that will serve them effectively?
Well, I don't know. I don't know who's going to win the majority leader race. I don't know who's going to win the whips race. But I do know this, that John Boehner was underrated in terms of his ability to manage this fractious caucus. And I know that this caucus is just as fractious as it was under John Boehner. So the dynamics have not changed, and these guys are now new people coming into these positions in a very difficult environment, made all the more difficult by the onrushing presidential campaign. I think they are going to have a hard time, a very hard time.
As best we can tell, everyone who's thinking of running now is a white man.
Yep.
That's no good.
Yeah.
And there's a lack of reformer zeal. There's a lot of rhetoric from McCarthy and others about we want to speak for the people and we want to address concerns. McCarthy on Morning Joe this morning talked about the highway bill, talked about government reform, but big overarching revolutionary policy ideas aren't coming from this group.
Well, not just big and revolutionary, but also, you talk about the McCarthy thing this morning. You were on with him. It was not just not revolutionary, but not inspiring, not fresh feeling. It was kind of procedural and the kind of talk that makes eyes glaze over for a lot of voters. I'm not feeling it yet with this group.
And no Paul Ryan in the mix.
Correct, and that would be a big deal if he were. All right, House Republicans today were also consumed by the Planned Parenthood hearing, the latest event in the fallout of those controversial videos. The group's president, Cecile Richards, testified for 2.5 hours this morning and fought back against Republicans who made the case that Planned Parenthood should lose its federal funding. Here's how she handled a particularly aggressive confrontation with Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio.
The outrageous accusations leveled against Planned Parenthood based on heavily doctored videos are offensive and categorically untrue.
Which true statements in that video were you apologizing for, Ms. Richards?
I was reflecting that on that video, not any particular statement, that did not reflect the compassionate care that we provide.
You can't have it both ways. You can't say I'm apologizing for statements in one video and then not tell us what those statements were.
This is an attack on 2.7 million patients who each year choose Planned Parenthood as their health care provider.
All right, Mark, as a matter of politics, and that's pretty much all this is, who is winning the war on Planned Parenthood?
I think it's pretty much a deadlock at this point, although the fight will continue to go on. That was a contentious hearing. I think both sides probably came away with their supporters rallied. Democrats are more on defense on this, even with the media, which is usually sympathetic to Planned Parenthood and abortion rights, than they have been in a while since the partial birth abortion issue came up. But this fight will continue. Republicans feel energized by it, and all their presidential candidates will talk about it.
I thought you're 100% right that I watched this hearing, or a decent chunk of it. I thought that it will change no minds. And in that case, Planned Parenthood is winning. Because if you look at that NBC Wall Street Journal poll, it is still a highly respected institution in American life. It is overwhelmingly respected. I believe the most respected institution that the poll tested. Even people who don't like Planned Parenthood don't think you should shut down the government over it. It's in a very strong position at the beginning of this fight. Unless Republicans win over converts, Planned Parenthood wins.
Well, but there's also the intensity issue. This issue has really energized people on the right in a way that again makes them feel not on defense on a social issue.
But the Republican attacks just energize the people who are many, many women and many people on the left. And so the energy levels rise. If this continues and this becomes a big issue for Republican presidential candidates, it's going to play to their disadvantage, I'm pretty sure.
All right, coming up, a classic WADR twofer. Our guest, veteran Republican campaign counsel Ben Ginsberg, and former White House Communications Director, Democrat Anita Dunn, after this word from our sponsors.
Our guest tonight is two guests tonight. Ben Ginsberg, former counsel to George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, and also a veteran of Mitt Romney's presidential campaign. Alongside him is President Obama's former communications director, Anita Dunn. Gentlemen, let us begin by just getting your basic assessment of where the two presidential campaigns start. Ben, I want to hear you quickly on the Republican side and the Democratic side, and then we'll turn to Anita.
Very fluid on the Republican side. Unusually talented field, all of them feeling their way through a very different sort of political year. Still anyone's race, I think. Yeah. On the Democratic side, God, I love watching it.
Okay, fair enough. Anita.
That's kind of the way we Democrats are feeling every time we see the Republicans on TV. So I think Ben and I can share that emotion right there. You know, on the Democratic side, we're about to enter the next period, which is a period of engagement. Debates, speeches, a lot more high-level engagement. And I think, you know, there are a couple of things that I'm looking for. One is the September 30th fundraising reports. I think we all expect Hillary Clinton to have done extremely well. Yeah. The real question is going to be, what does Bernie Sanders look like? Yeah. Because I suspect that his online fundraising is going to be very impressive, just based on everything we've seen so far about that campaign. And two will be, you know, that first debate. Obviously, there's a question out there about whether there are 5 or 6 people. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. But I think that the, you know, what are the strategies the candidates bring into those debates? It's going to be quite interesting. On the Republican side, I think that the assumption that somehow, you know, gravity was going to bring some people down, raise some people up, doesn't seem to be happening. And it is fascinating as poll after poll shows that the Republican primary voters are so not just angry at Washington, but actively rejecting anybody. It was supposed to be the year of the governor. We've had 2 governors drop out already, I guess. No, they're rejecting political experience, not just Washington.
And you were, there's a voice from the grassroots that's not been heard in this way this early, and that's absolutely correct. Part of the question on looking at the Republican candidates and how they post up will be what Anita said about the September 30th reports. Guys, what's the level that is enough for a Republican candidate to be taken as credible, since the media is going to have a lot more to say to that? Yeah.
Enough to pay the bills.
Come on.
That's enough. I mean, I was surprised. You were working with Governor Walker before he got out. I was surprised those 2 guys got at Walker and Perry, because you've got 50% of the votes sitting with people who most people in the establishment think Trump, Carson, Fiorina aren't going to be the nominee. It seems to me anybody who doesn't raise enough slims down, particularly if you're still in the debates, and fights it out. We talked about Bush in the first segment, Jeb Bush, and his current position in the polls, not doing particularly well. What would it take, do you think, for Jeb Bush to move up in the polls at this point?
Oh, I think a good fundraising quarter is certainly part of it. I think you got to look at the cash on hand, particularly.
You think that alone will move him up?
No. I mean, there's a long list of things here. Doing well in the next debates, making a breakthrough there. Too bad it's not, from his perspective, till the end of October. Would have benefited from having more debates more often. The emergence of field organizations in the key states, and a realization of the way this cycle's primary calendar is different from others.
At what point, the Bush campaign keeps saying it's early still, we have a lot of money in the bank, we're building a sound foundation for this candidacy. At what point is it's no longer early? At what point is Jeb Bush continuing on a gradual downward trajectory? It's become clear to people that the dogs are not eating the dog food.
So I don't believe that actually happens till the voters vote, because they are the ultimate consumers of this. So I think, again, you got to recognize what the calendar is. Look at the first 4 states. That's a ticket-punching exercise, and then being able to do well the night of March 1st is going to be the tipping point for this race.
Ben, let me ask you a question. You've got the first 4 states, and then you've got March 1st with that, you know, large number. What role do you think momentum plays? I think that's something that everyone's looking at now. You know, certainly in the Democratic Party, you hear people starting to muse, well, if Bernie Sanders wins Iowa, and right now, you know, in the Real Clear Politics average, he's trailing Clinton by 5 or 6 points in Iowa. If he wins New Hampshire, then what kind of momentum does he take in? And I'm curious about what the Republicans think in terms of that momentum piece.
Well, I think that Hillary Clinton is a presumptive frontrunner. Can't let that happen. I think the Republican side now, because the field does look pretty level, is a little bit different. I'm also my Mitt Romney experience chastens me on the momentum part, right? Because Mitt Romney won 3.5 of the first 5 states. That should have been momentum. The reality is that the calendar didn't let him cinch the nomination till the end of April, and not mathematically till May.
But it did winnow the field down quite a bit and create finalists.
Right? It did, but did not. It was a different field. This is a much more talented field in 2016, and so there can be more in it.
Is there anything out there except his own personal situation that you see in the data, the endorsements, the media coverage that would, if you were Joe Biden, would deter you from running, or everything would say go except for the personal choice?
I think there are significant obstacles to anybody who would get in this late. And we've just been talking about some of them. Money, organization, endorsements, the infrastructure of a presidential campaign, and obviously Hillary Clinton's campaign, run by some of the best people in the Democratic Party and really talented people. Not that, obviously there are a lot of talented people in the other campaigns, but let's just stipulate she's got a great campaign. Right. And that would be a huge obstacle. But for him, it's personal.
Anita Dunn, Ben Ginsberg, thank you. When we come back, the great Will Leach assesses the new host of The Daily Show after this.
Why didn't they get an American to host? And again, Comedy Central tried, and those people also declined. And so once more, a job Americans rejected is now being done by an immigrant.
That was Trevor Noah in his Daily Show debut last night. We could sit here and kibitz over whether he did well, but instead we'll bring in our senior political and cultural intersection correspondent, the great Will Leach. Will, how did he do?
Well, it's certainly a difficult assignment. This is a show with a loyal audience, and he basically is introducing himself to America. And, that's a great line, so I think he delivered it well. He was clearly nervous. He spoke very, very fast. I think it was jarring, actually, how quickly he spoke. But, this is still a writing set that's been there for a long time. It's only the first night. You can't overreact to it too much. He didn't break any of the furniture. He didn't knock anything over. For one night, I think he acquitted himself as well as you could possibly hope he could. There's still a lot of work left to go.
All right, so Will, I talk fast on TV too, so I never subtract points for that. The Daily Show, obviously, with Jon Stewart, politics was a huge part of. That's why we're talking about it, and it's a huge part of the following. So last night, Noah took on one of the biggest stories in politics right now on Capitol Hill. Let's look at that.
The Beltway bombshell. House Speaker John Boehner abruptly resigning from Congress.
No! Why leave now? I just got here. I got a fancy suit and a new set, and I learned how to pronounce your name. Boehner.
All right, it's the old Boehner pronouncer joke, which we've heard a lot on late night TV. So obviously, one of the questions is he going to keep the Jon Stewart audience? Will the Daily Show still be the place to go for late night political junkies? Based on that joke and what we know about Noah, is he going to keep up Jon Stewart's level of political satire and commentary?
Yeah, it certainly speaks to the fact he's new to American politics. The idea that if you're doing the Boehner joke now, like that joke was old 15 years ago. So it's clear, he actually is going to be growing into the job in a lot of ways. But it's worth remembering, this is essentially the same writing staff. He's brought in some new people. But across the whole, this is the same staff that's won all those Emmys. It's not like a lot of them is left. Basically, the only person they've lost is Stewart on the writing staff. So certainly they're gonna let him work his way into that. It was still kind of strange watching him deliver Jon Stewart-esque jokes when we know he doesn't know politics as well yet, but I think that's something they're going to try to work him in as the months go along.
Will the casting himself as a little bit of a political neophyte seems like not a bad strategy, but he had a couple of jokes last night that rang a little bit, maybe a little clunky, and some that were not totally lighthearted. Here is another Boehner joke, as I say, with a slightly different tone than that last one.
John Boehner has final say about which laws come in and which laws don't. He's basically the bouncer at Club Congress. Which is probably the worst club ever. I mean, everyone at the club has AIDS. That's
Okay, so AIDS wordplay on Trevor Noah's first night in the chair. I'm curious what you think that might tell us about his style going down the line.
It's certainly a groaner. There's no question about that. But one thing I thought is interesting is one of the things we actually think that we know about Noah is that he's been offensive on Twitter in the past. You know, he's actually talked a lot, kind of fought back against kind of outrage culture, which has actually hurt him a lot with a lot of Daily Show viewers. I think it's telling, though, that on this first night, remember, this was broadcast on all of Viacom properties. Like, this was a massive debut. For him to go for a joke like that, maybe not the best joke, but it shows there might be a fearlessness to him that maybe might push back against the audience in a way that ultimately can make the show his. The question is whether the audience is going to be there with him.
All right, obviously another big part of Jon Stewart's talent was he's a darn good interviewer. People liked the way he interviewed all kinds of guests, funny but also informative. Noah's first guest yesterday was comedian Kevin Hart. Let's look at the interview stylings of the new host.
Touring the world, making movies.
Yes, sir.
With a rock star body as well.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I mean, it's really beautiful.
Have you seen my pants?
So, obviously, that was not a hard-hitting interview, but I thought his style was pretty friendly. It was pretty welcoming. What did you think of him as a sit-down interviewer? And do you think we're going to see him with presidential candidates and other big people in politics the way Jon Stewart did?
Yeah, certainly the rock star body question is not going to work for Bernie Sanders yet. Anyway, the campaign is young, but certainly, yeah, he's going to have to work on that, because Stewart was known not just for doing good interviews, but doing very knowledgeable interviews, and that's something that Noah's clearly going to have to get brushed up on. He was comfortable. There's something inherently likable about him. Like there's a youth and excitement. He looks good in the suit. He's got a great smile. There's something winning about him that Hart liked about it. So you hope that continues to. I think that'll help him in the future. But yeah, he's got to brush up a little bit.
Will, yes or no, you think that by the time we get to November 2016 that Trevor Noah is going to be anywhere near as important a voice in the political scene as Jon Stewart was?
I don't think so. But, after a year, Jon Stewart was not as important as he was then either. It's going to take him a long time to kind of get there.
Yeah, you're a very generous and good-natured man, Will. We will see how he does. We will see how Trevor Noah does when he sits down with Governor Chris Christie this week and faces his first real presidential candidate. Will Leach, thanks a ton, and we'll be right back. We are on TV twice a day at 5 and at 8, but we're live 24/7 at BloombergPolitics.com, where you can read Will Leach's piece on Trevor Noah and other great stories about Planned Parenthood, Jeb Bush, and all kinds of other great stuff. Big day in politics tomorrow. Lots of candidates in Iowa and New Hampshire. The unrest continues on Capitol Hill. We'll bring it all to you on tomorrow's With All Due Respect. Until tomorrow, for this man, John Heilemann, for myself, we say thanks for watching. Sayonara.